Staples, as he's away this week. Joining me are Rich Allen. Hi, Rich.
Good evening.
Peter Rutzler. Hi, Peter.
Hello.
And our special guest, Julien Laurens. Hello, Julien.
Hi, guys.
Fantastic stuff. We'll be talking all things Liga over the next hour or so, but we'll start with this weekend's news. Montpellier continued their outstanding run against top teams on Friday night, steering off Saint-Etienne at the Stade Graffour Gijard with a 1-0 win, thanks to a first-half strike from Isaac Mbenza. On Saturday, Monaco broke out of their recent funk with a 2-0 win over high-flying Caen, with recent signing Keita Balde netting his first goal for Les Monégasques. In the multiplex, Amiens pulled off the shock of the weekend as they beat Bordeaux 1-0 at the Stade Auchan in Le Havre, with Guillaume Gossot grabbing the only goal of the game, while Nantes rose to incredible third place with a 2-1 victory over Guingamp as Claudio Ranieri's men claimed their 6th win in the last 8 games. They are in fantastic form. Toulouse notched their 2nd win in a row, thank goodness, as Ace Diop scored the winning goal to beat Angers. Dijon bounced back from last weekend's late defeat by dumping more misery on Metz, who in fact sacked Philipp Hinchberger this weekend as a result, bottom of the table, walking away from Metz with a 2-1 result. Rennes barely scraped past Lille in the clash of the calamities, with Benjamin Bourigeaud briefly lifting the malaise over Christian Gourcuff after a late sending off on Marcelo Bielsa's side, which leaves them in the relegation zone. On Sunday, Nice slipped to a 2-1 defeat to Strasbourg, despite the away side being reduced to 10 men for the majority of the second half. This result leaves Lucien Favre's men 10 points, but only a single point above the relegation playoff. Lyon continued to ride their current wave as they swept past Troyes 5-0. They were fantastic in the second half especially. Even Memphis Depay had a good game, who had seemingly been in the doghouse in recent weeks, but he grabbed a hat-trick in a strong display from OL. And of course, on Sunday night, we were treated to a truly memorable Le Classique. Marseille took a lot from PSG, but ended up with a 2-2 draw. Neymar controversially sent off towards the end. Edison Cavani with the equalising free kick in injury time. So, chaps, before we get to our talking points, just a quick reminder to check out Get Football News France and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. So, let's start with that game at the Velodrome last night, chaps. It was a fantastic game. After a sort of somewhat checkered history for La Classique in recent times, Marseille hadn't won a game in La Classique for 14 matches. So, Julien, we'll start with you. Many didn't think that Marseille would amount to much of a challenge to Paris Saint-Germain, but in the end, the champions were lucky to get out of this one with their unbeaten record intact, were they not?
Yeah, you're right. I was a bit surprised, to be fair, by the sort of like all negativity, and I'm talking as a huge PSG fan, obviously. I was really surprised by the negativity from PSG players themselves, saying that it was a game like any other, and that Daniel Alves didn't know anyone in the Marseille team. All that chat, plus all the pundits on all the French talk shows saying that Marseille had no chance, Marseille couldn't do anything. They were going to get spanked. They were going to get this. They were going to get that. And I was thinking, anything is possible in football. And this PSG team hadn't played well for a long time, despite winning. Even against Anderlecht, it was the most unconvincing 4-0 win in the history of European football. So I was far more skeptical than most people were, and it was hard to believe. I still thought PSG would win, but I thought it would be difficult and far tighter than everybody was thinking it would be.
Do you think that PSG have sort of two modes? They sort of play one way in the Champions League. They're getting very good results in the Champions League. As you mentioned, it wasn't the most convincing of 4-0 wins, but they're still playing much better in that competition. And then playing Ligue 1 in the last few weeks, although they've got decent results, that 0-0 draw at Montpellier wasn't great. They were lucky to beat Dijon, and this game here, have they got two different settings, and perhaps they need to sort of merge the two and play like PSG, one unified sort of philosophy, if you like?
No, I think they're complacent. They're very, very complacent. I think they're complacent in every single game. I think that's the issue for me. The arrogance I can deal with, because I think Parisians by definitions are all very arrogant, me included. But I can deal with that if then you deliver. I've got no problem with Ibrahimovic being arrogant and then, to a certain extent, delivering on the pitch. No problem with that. My issue is if you're one arrogant and two complacent, because the two don't go well together. And I think they were complacent against Montpellier going away. Okay, the pitch was not good. Neymar wasn't there, but they were clearly not up for it, probably because they thought they would be easy. They were complacent at Dijon. They were complacent at Anderlecht, and they were complacent again in Marseille. And there's a point where, you know, even against Lyon, by the way, I thought they were complacent. And there will be a point where, you know, they won't win anymore, or they won't even draw. They're going to get beaten, and that's all they would deserve when they're that complacent, because they don't play well. Their attitude is not right. They don't play as a team. Unai Emery, I'm not really sure exactly what he's doing. So that's my issue more than the Tumo thing, which, you know, maybe, okay, in bigger games, they go up a gear in the level and all of that. But I still think the main issue for this team is their complacency.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. And you mentioned Unai Emery there. I'll move on to you, Peter, on this point. How much of an issue is Unai Emery's sort of lack of man management? It feels like that the team are sort of dominating him a little bit at the moment, and his influence is pretty weak.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think we've talked about this before on the pod, looking at how Emery's going to manage so many different egos. And fundamentally, with bringing in Neymar and then Kylian Mbappe, they've brought in players who they've made bigger than not only Emery, but also the club as well. And dealing with an ego like that, Neymar, of course, has his own pedigree for his own ostentatious behavior, his individualism. But to have that kind of reputation coming into the team, that price tag as well, it's a very difficult job for Emery to win at any stage. And it does seem like, especially the way they played yesterday, and they have been playing, as Julien was saying, it does seem like that they are playing like individuals. And that's one of the main criticism that was made about the result last night, was that Marseille, you know, played as a team and PSG didn't. For Emery, it's such a difficult task to deal with those egos. And can he manage it? I don't know. The only way he can be seen as a success is, you know, if he goes all the way in the Champions League. And I think the only example you can really think of someone dealing in similar circumstances would be, say, Zidane at Real Madrid. And one of the problems Real Madrid had before he came in was having a manager who was able to, whose reputation could push the side onwards. And they had Mourinho and Ancelotti, but in Zidane they looked at a player who was equally as good. You know, he was an incredible player, and when you have that, it makes it easier, I would say, to manage those players who see themselves as being at the pinnacle, as being the best. And of course, Neymar wants to win the Ballon d'Or. He already sees himself on that level. It was admittedly part of the reason for his move to push himself to that level. And Emery doesn't have that reputation, so it's a very difficult task. And not only that, he's got all the squad selection issues, especially on the going forward. It's going to be a real test of his character, his ability, and his man management. And so far, it doesn't seem like he's got a hand on it yet, I would say.
I think the big gripe I had, one of the big gripes I had, was it seemed to me that a lot of the PSG players just didn't seem particularly interested last night. I think there was great spells during that game where it just didn't look like, you know, this is supposed to be one of their biggest domestic games anyway, games of the season, and it didn't seem like that the PSG players were particularly bothered by that. And I sort of sent out a tweet after the game to say I find it quite almost sad that, you know, is this the case? And I had a couple of PSG friends come back and say, well, you know, we've got bigger fish to fry now, and Marseille, you know, used to be a big game, but it's no longer. And it's a question I suppose to you, Julien, is, as a PSG fan, is that something that you would agree with, or do you still see Marseille as this massive clash?
No, I still think it as a massive clash. You know, maybe some of the PSG fans have got a bit posher, and they only want the caviar of the Champions League, which I would understand, but I don't think you should forget, you know, where you're coming from, and things like that. You know, I was watching the games with my two boys last night, and I've got a baby daughter that was born not long ago, and we didn't want her to see her first Classique and PSG losing. That was not. So when Cavani scored, we went mad, and the house went mad and everything. And when you see the video of the PSG Ultras, who obviously were not allowed to travel to Marseille, but clearly a couple of hundreds of them were in that bar somewhere in Paris, and the way they exploded when Cavani scored it shows you that for most of PSG fans, it's still a huge clash. So it's a shame, like you said, Rich, that, you know, PSG players clearly feels differently, or at least felt differently. And it goes beyond me what Kylian Mbappe said after the Anderlecht game, when him, of all people, who is a Paris-born and bred kid, who it was his first Classic ever, and you would think, come on, the guy surely must be excited to play his first Classic. I mean, when he was growing up, Classic were, you know, and well, still are, but even more maybe when he was growing up, were like the game. You know, it was bigger than anything else. And I can play one, and he comes up with all that BS of, oh, no, it's a game like any other. It's this, it's nothing special. What are you talking about? Where is this coming from? And I think it was obvious to see. And again, I'm not, you know, I don't pretend to know everything, but I thought, shit, they're not going to approach this game in the right way. Because on the other hand, you knew that, one, it would wind up everybody in Marseille, and rightly so. Two, Rudy Garcia would use that to say to his players, look, you know, they're taking you lightly. They like clearly underestimating you. And, you know, of course he was going to use that as a tool if needed to get his players like, you know, proper up for it, because clearly the PSG players were not up for it. And I think very early on you saw it in that game that, you know, one team were ready, the other wasn't. One team I think Peter said, were like playing as a team and not the other, and it was so obvious. And I think, like you said, Rich, I think it's really sad.
Do we think that?
Oh, sorry, go on, Peter.
No, it's just I was just going to say, do we think that that sort of arrogance that Julien mentioned is in danger of becoming toxic? It was really interesting what McQueen has said about Neymar being a mentor for Mbappe, which seems like, given Mbappe is such a sort of fresh young kid and he's always had such a great attitude, for Neymar, who's got this kind of playboy image, whether that's true or not is open to debate, but is that sort of influence in danger of becoming toxic, and is it going to sort of, can it really affect their season in the long term?
I think it could. Yeah, I think absolutely could. I think what Julien picked up on there about Rudy Garcia using that kind of, I think you'll find certainly more and more teams do it. Rudy Garcia certainly did that last night. That was by far and away one of the best Marseille performances I've seen certainly this season. And probably for the last couple of seasons. They really, really looked like a unit. They really believed in themselves. Certainly that defence, I've been highly, highly critical of that defence. Yeah, but Rami, Rolando, Sakai, Amavi, they look good. I mean, they're not world-class defenders, but they work together. That attacking threat that PSG have posed so many teams this season. So what I think PSG will find is, if that arrogance and complacence becomes more widespread and more frequent and certainly more visible, you're going to get opponents who are going to be able to use that to their advantage.
Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned Marseille. In fact, Peter, I'd like to ask you about Marseille, because they're kind of the forgotten story in this game to some extent, because obviously all the talk is about Neymar sending off and obviously the fact that PSG, you know, nearly blew it. But is this a bit of a watershed moment for Marseille, because the Champions project's been marked by from all sides, including us on the preview show on a number of occasions. But is this a turning point for them?
Yeah, I think Garcia will want to turn it into a turning point, and there's no reason why it can't be. I mean, as you guys were saying, as Rich was saying, we saw another side to Marseille and their squad, and they were galvanised by those comments that PSG players were making, and they put everything on the pitch. I was really impressed with, like Rich, defensively. I thought Amavi was excellent, and I think that would be a real boost. We were talking before we went on air about what this means for Evra long term, but I thought he was outstanding at left back. Thauvin was excellent defensively. Going forward, he didn't have so much of an opportunity, but then when he got his chance, he took it. I think in terms of going forward as a watershed, they've got to take that atmosphere and within the squad and use that in games coming forward, because you're not always going to have the same momentum coming into a game like PSG. You're not always going to have that sort of build-up. But there's no reason why it can't be. And it has been such a change from what we've seen. I mean, last week against Strasbourg, defensively, Marseille were all over the place. And Adil Rami had an absolute shocker. He was appalling. I mean, a couple of the goals were deflected and you can't really fully blame him for them. But what we saw on Sunday was a different side to him. The experienced French international that had done so well at Valencia and in the past. So I think he's one example of a player who can take confidence from the Classique. And obviously it was a disappointing result. But going forward, it is a boost. And we saw other sides to players, like Luis Gustavo looked like someone I hadn't seen before. I mean,
he's brilliant. Yeah.
This was a performance that will do his confidence a world of good, but also for Garcia, it's such a bonus to know that they're going to get behind him and they're willing to rally for him.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The trajectory Marseille are on this season. Julien, I'd really love to get your thoughts on how you appraise Garcia's tenure at Marseille, because they kind of looked very disjointed recently, and they still, to me at least, feel like a collection of individuals, and they haven't really morphed into a team as yet. Is Garcia's reign in its current guise, is it sustainable?
For me, the jury is still out. I still think that he still has a lot to prove. I mean, even if I try to stay objective, for me last night was PSG making the game really easy for Marseille. I didn't see anything from this Marseille team that made me think, all right, okay, wow, they were so good. And, they can go on a proper run now. They can easily finish second. They're better than Monaco. They're better than Lyon. They're better. I don't think so. I think the way PSG played, obviously played in Marseille's hands because they were there to defend. And they had a game plan which was very defensive. They got lucky on the Luis Gustavo goal. They got lucky on the Thauvin goal. They should have had a penalty against them. They faced a PSG team, like we said, where it was literally 7 defenders and 3 attackers in the MCN, where Verratti, or maybe a bit less Rabiot, but we're literally giving the ball to Neymar and Mbappe and saying to them, well, do what you can, because that's how PSG have been playing the last few games, by having that incredible fracture between the 3 up front and the rest of the team. So I thought PSG made it really easy for Marseille last night. And for that reason, I find it difficult to analyze this draw with a lot of positive for Marseille. Okay, Luis Gustavo looked good, but did he look good because he only had to defend like the whole of his back 4 and Anguissa as well against the MTN? Because in that case, they were 6 against 3 the whole time, because Rabiot rarely, or at least on the goal, he went a bit further, but Rabiot and Verratti hardly joined up front. The fullbacks never went forward either, which meant, or very rarely, which meant that Thauvin and Ocampos, we can say, oh yeah, defensively they were good. I don't think that actually to do that much defensively, because Kurzawa and Meunier were quite shy going forward. So I struggle a bit to when I saw Lyon at the Parc des Princes, I thought, okay, there are flaws in this Lyon team, but if Genesio, who I don't like at all and I still think he's a bit of a fraud, if he tweaks a few things, they might actually become a very good, balanced and solid team, at least going forwards. And it looks like they're actually finding the right formula, even with Fekir and without Fekir right now. But with Marseille last night, I'm thinking more, well, I think PSG gifted them that draw, or probably even could have gifted them a win by being so complacent, so negative in many ways, and so bad in many ways that actually they may look Marseille maybe being better than what they actually are. So I'm looking forward to Lille next weekend. I don't think that's an easy game at all, away from home for Marseille against Bielsa and against a team that have to win big time. And I'm waiting a bit more to see if, like you said, Garcia and the team can reproduce this kind of thing. But they won't be able to, because in the next game they can't be just so defensive. And the game after either. Where was Dimitri Payet last night?
Yeah, he was absent, wasn't he?
Where has he been all season? So again, and that's not my PSG cap on. It's just like trying to be objective by saying that I saw a Marseille team that was helped a lot by the bad game that PSG had, if you see what I mean, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think the question that you asked with Marseille is, from that performance last night, can they now go and get a guaranteed 6 points from Lille and Caen? And I'm still not in a position to say yes, they can.
I agree.
That probably gives you the insight into, Garcia. I think it was a good performance from Marseille. It was a lot more organised. I think when they conceded that equaliser, a Marseille recent times, certainly this season, would have absolutely crumbled Julian's right. I think they were aided immensely by the way PSG played the game. But Marseille were still organised. Their heads didn't drop. They still, put in parts, and obviously got the to ascertain whether this project is now, is this where we now start this new project for good? Well, I don't know, because I couldn't say to you right now, yes, they're going to beat Lille. Yes, they're going to beat Caen. And if I was in the position to say yes to both of those, then going in the right direction. But there's still, I think, plenty of work for to do if this project really is to become champions quality.
Yeah, it's just not good enough from their point of view. I know Garcia's sort of been given the remit to improve this season. What they finished, fifth last year. Do we think, very quickly going around the table to finish this Marseille chat off, do we think Marseille, in their current guys with Garcia in charge and with the squad as it is, the team playing as it is, can improve on last season? Rich, I'll start with you.
Yes, if they bring the right kind of players in January, but no, if it's based purely on this current squad.
Interesting. Peter?
Not if you look at their current transfer investment. I mean, we've talked about this, about the kind of players they're bringing in. They're bringing older players who, like Rami, who haven't impressed. Metroglou was totally absent yesterday. If you're building a project longer term, you want to be looking at players potentially either with resale value or with some kind of stage development for potential. So the current squad, no. With Rich, yes, if they can invest, but I don't trust them to invest correctly at the moment.
Julien?
I think they finished fourth. I think which will be a slight improvement compared to last year.
Interesting stuff. So just to finish off this chat on Le Classique, Neymar's red card, do we think justified or not? Peter, we'll start with you.
It was harsh, yes. Both yellows, you could say, were harsh. But the problem, especially with the second one, is the moment he rises to a Campos, the moment he moves to him, there's always the potential that, he could overreact. And it's under the referee's nose, and it's in the atmosphere and the climate, it's likely to get booked. And I think part of it is because of who he is. I mean, it's send Neymar off the Classique is, it's not, without being going after the referee too much. But it was harsh, but he knows he shouldn't react like that. He knows once you do that, you give the referee the opportunity to send him off. I can see why it was given.
Rich?
I agree. It was harsh, but considering it was only a couple of minutes after he picked up the first yellow, you just take the foul. You're keen to push on. You need the equaliser. You don't square up to any player, and I think Neymar of all players should know that.
Julien?
Yeah, I agree with the boys. I think he was as stupid as a Campos reaction, who I would ban, by the way, for a game as well, for pretending that Neymar had butted him when there was contact but nowhere near his face. And you know what? I think Mbappe could even have been sent off as well after the penalty appeal he had, which was a penalty for the Amavi handball, and the way he grabbed Rudy Buquet's arm. I think if he's in any other club in France, apart from PSG, he might get a red card for that. But because he's at PSG, because he's Kylian Mbappe, I think he gets away with only a yellow. But you can't grab the arm of the referee like this. I mean, come on. It's just like, this is not what you do. Cristiano took five games ban for a little push. And Mbappe grabbed the arm. And okay, I can see the frustration because it was an obvious penalty. And I can't work out how they didn't see the handball. But it was not given. Just move on. You can't just grab the referee like Mbappe did.
Indeed, I was surprised he wasn't more harshly punished too. Rich, you've got a slightly more sort of unusual view on this penalty. Do you want to tell us what that is?
It's not going to go down well with Julien.
That's why I asked.
Almost, I can see why it would be given, and certainly I think some replays and the stills that you see, yes, it looks very, very blatant. I think the only thing that I would say is, I think in real time, Amavi was just maybe he was completely ruthless. Maybe he was. Maybe also he was just a little unlucky that done a really, really good tackle on Mbappe. Really good tackle. He needed to get back to his feet immediately. His pushing up and getting the leverage off the ground was the only way that he was going to do that. Devil's advocate here, maybe that where his hand was just an incredibly unfortunate timing that the ball was there as well. Maybe it's that. But of course, I think I'm not going to get a lot of agreement. I think from many people, but that's just one take as to maybe wasn't given. Maybe, of course, the referee just completely missed it.
Sure. Okay. Brilliant stuff. We'll move on to the games. The game earlier in the day, at the start of the day. In fact, it was actually a really good game. A day of games. Sorry, over the course of league, and all three were interesting. And the early game was Nice-Strasbourg. So after two sort of surprising seasons, Nice are seemingly on a bit of a downturn. Lucien Favre's side are a point above the relegation playoff, lost the last 4 games in all competitions, and have lost 6 already in the league. Peter, is the bubble bursting at the Allianz Riviera?
Yeah, it's been a poor start to the season. There's no doubt about that. Is the bubble bursting? Maybe they were overachieving before. I mean, you could throw it that way, but I think they are missing Seri at his best. I think they're missing Cyprien as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I think against Strasbourg, there what appeared to be was just a real dearth of creativity in the middle of the park. I think the way Favre's been setting up, often with Balotelli with player up top, it gives Balotelli the option to drop deeper, to exercise control of games, and they really did miss him. I think with the midfield that they had, they didn't have the runners going beyond the way that Cyprien would do, the way that Seri does. It's an interesting one. I think they brought in Wesley Sneijder to try and aid them, give them another option creatively. And he hasn't featured so much. I think there was talk of him, of the club being disappointed with how he appeared when he arrived at the club, his fitness. So he's been building that up. And when he came on at halftime, I thought he was all right. He put himself about, was creative, changed the game a little bit. More concerningly is defensively they're conceding goals as well, and I mean they're conceding to a Strasbourg team that aren't exactly best friends with the opposition net. Let's call it that. Dante had an awful game. He showed his age quite considerably. I think compared to last year, they're missing fullbacks that were bombing on. I mean, Suke's a great fullback. I really do like him. Jallet at left back was quite exposed. I mean, he at one point there was Gonçalves absolutely rinsed him, and Gonçalves is not a winger. He's a central midfielder. So there has been some turnover and there has been some changes. And I think once they do get the likes of Cyprien back, I think he'll be back relatively soon, not in the immediate future, but Seri as well. And the thing with Seri is I don't think has been the same player since the transfer window closed, even before he's now in the last couple of games. But I think that has affected him. It could also be the setup. 4-4-2 hasn't allowed him the same license to get forward in a 2 in the middle. But he hasn't looked the same player as he did even at the start of the season in the Champions League qualifiers. So that's another aspect to it. I think there is. I think Favre is a good tactician, and he can find a way around this bad spell. And we saw that against Monaco with how well they played. So I think it's a bad spell, and I do think they will bounce back. But for now, I won't go as far as to say the bubbles burst necessarily.
Yeah, I definitely agree on missing when in Cyprien. He was absolutely brilliant. Sort of first 2/3 of last season. But Julien, Peter mentioned Jallet there. There's also obviously the addition of Wesley Sneijder. Has their sort of recruitment policy not really come off this season? Has it really affected their performances? And is there anything they can do to change that?
Well, you can buy better players in January, maybe, or next summer. It's always the problem with the business model that Nice and Monaco have. When you are happy to let your best player go, when that's your policy to let your best player go, it's always harder to replace them. You can't replace Dalbert and Ricardo Pereira so easily. So Suke Okay, he's had some good games. I'm still not completely convinced that he's at the level that Ricardo was on. At left back, they clearly couldn't replace Dalbert. They couldn't find another left back that they wanted. I think they even tried to get Amavi back to the club. So now Jallet, who's right-footed, who's already not very good at right back, has to go at left back. And when he's not there, it's Malang Sarr, who's everything as a defender but a left back, who has to play as left back, and he's been a disaster every time he's played there. So I think they've had issue with their recruitment on many levels. But again, I don't think it's easy to replace all those players, to replace Esseric, to replace Belanda. And you see with someone like Saint-Maximin, for example, who could be brilliant one day and absolutely atrocious the next day. And with, I don't know, I mean, the youngsters, they bought like Tamez and Makengo and Coley, and Favre doesn't think they're ready just yet for this kind of level. Okay, but then, then buy other people as well, because if you buy those players and you don't think they're ready after 2.5 months, maybe, soon 3.5, even if you count the preseason, then there's a problem somewhere, because you're still low in numbers, because you judge those players not ready. So I think overall it was a difficult summer, but it was always going to be a difficult summer, and they got lucky to keep Seri, although, like one of the boys said, it's not the same Serie as before. And of course, it was never going to be the same Serie as before. And if on top of that, you don't have Balotelli for a game like the one on Sunday against Strasbourg, who has been the best player this season, when Plea is struggling like he is at the moment, it's a lot of issues put one after the other that makes it really hard even to beat a team like Strasbourg.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a relatively small squad as well, looking at it, especially when you get those 1 or 2 injuries. It really does affect their first 11. Rich, moving on to you very, very quickly on this Nice point. Given that Nice fans have come to expect a certain level of performance over the last couple of years, with Favre and with Claude Puel as well, is time running out for Lucien Favre? Is this a similar situation to happen at Mönchengladbach when it really fell off a cliff for him and there was no rescuing it? Is he on his way out?
I don't think so. I think he's got time. He obviously did such a terrific job last season. I think it's only natural that there is going to be this sort of blip in form. They've got some good players who are just not playing very well at the minute. We know that Dante is a good defender. We saw that last season. We've seen that when he was in Germany. He's just not at his best at the minute. That form will return. They got Cyprian. I think Cyprian's due back in November. I think he tweeted something out about November and a few smiley faces. So I can only presume that that's what that means. So his return, albeit it's going to be a very phased return due to the nature of his injury, boost. He's such a fantastic player. It is a peculiar project, because they want to bring in a lot of these young players, but they want to bring in these high profile name players. And I just question those sometimes. Balotelli has paid off in parts, not paid off in other parts. I don't think Schneider's going to be a particularly good signing, although I'll await to be proven very, very wrong on that. But they've got some really good youngsters. I think the club and the board just have to trust Favre that he knows what he's doing. He seems to be on board with this project. Let him prove that he can get this team out of the poor run of form it is, because I think once players have come back from injury, once players have rediscovered form, and once there's been a few additions in the January transfer window, this very well would be very similar to the Nice that we saw last seson.
The problem they have, sorry to jump in, the problem they have as well is Europe, and once again, it's great playing in Europe. The Europa League not as great as the Champions League, but it's cool. It's great. You've got all those teams that they're quite exotic. You go Vitesse Arnhem, you go to Belgium. Lazio is a great game. It's a great double fixture, but it's killing them. It is absolutely killing them. One, because they don't have the depth of squad, like we said. Two, because most of those players are not ready to play in Europe, even at that kind of level. I mean, come on, Vitesse Arnhem and Zulte are not. It's not exceptional, but they still, it still takes some adaptation. There's the traveling, there's the whole novelty of the whole thing, And I think that's killing them. The best thing that could happen to them is to be knocked out quickly, like they did last year, like, you know, exactly what happened last year. The problem is they're not going to because they will finish second behind Lazio, so they're going to qualify. It's another round, which with a bit of luck they're going to get an easy draw, which means they're going to qualify from the last 32 to the last 16. With a bit of luck, maybe they're going to get another good draw, and then it's an extra game. And I think Thierry Laurens was saying it yesterday after the game. He said like it's unfair on them. They have 3 games in 8 days, you know, and I think it's. You know, Monaco are ready, Lyon are ready, PSG are ready for those kind. Even Marseille, in many ways, are ready for this kind of like playing every 3 days kind of thing. But I don't think Nice are ready, and I think that's costing them a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of worries, a lot of problems, and you know, and it's not good.
Yeah, it really stands out with Ligue 1 size. It's especially with Saint-Etienne and Bordeaux over the last couple of seasons. They haven't been able to handle the 2-game-a-week situation, especially with Bordeaux and in Nice's case, with young squads. That sort of rotation of games, that quick pace, really takes a lot of getting used to, and they don't have that experience. And they're not the first Ligue 1 side to fall foul of that. But a great win nonetheless for Strasbourg, despite Nice's European commitments. Do we think that this team, despite a shaky start, they've only got 9 points, but this was definitely a marquee win from their point of view. Can they stay up, Peter?
Yes. I mean, it's the last few results have been good for them. They're now 3 unbeaten. They were really unlucky against Marseille not to get 3 points in a game full of errors. They've been the injury to Idris Sadi has been a little bit of a blessing in disguise, I think, for them. It's allowed them to put Terrier up front, who's been so good. I'm sure Bielsa at Lille would love to have him back in a heartbeat.
Yeah, so many players like that. Zeka and a few others too. Yeah, City too. Yeah,
a number of them. And De Costa's scoring goals, and that was the issue before. Was they're not finding the net, and De Costa's found his feet. They look very solid. I mean, they were very creative going forward on the break. Laurie had them set up very well. The question is, can they keep it up? They've got Saint-Etienne in the cup, Angers at home. They'll want to win that, and then Troyes away. And then Rennes at home, which Rich will say is definitely a winnable game. Yeah, I think defensively they still have a lot of questions. Mongan hasn't featured for a while, and he was just a comedy of errors, to say the least. But then again, the Kones looked better. They brought him in towards the end of the transfer window. Him and Salmier together, they don't fill you with confidence. And then, of course, Seka giving away the penalty shows a little bit of inexperience there too. So I think that there are still a number of issues with Strasbourg, but I think when they're at home, that's where the best opportunities to pick up points because of that atmosphere. They do seem to find another level when they play at Le Mans now. So yeah, they can, but it'll be tight, and they'll definitely take a boost from getting 4 points from Marseille and Nice, and you can't complain about that. Absolutely,
it's great to have them back in Ligue 1. They're such an interesting team, and with such a good fan base, they're a great addition to the league. Just to round off this Strasbourg Nice chat, then, chaps. A quick sentence on where do we think Strasbourg will finish? Julien, I'll start with you.
Sorry, boys. I love their fans. I love the stadium. I think it's a great football town, but they've conceded 18 goals already. I think defensively they're just not good enough to stay up. So the only hope I have for them is that they finish 18. They get into the playoff against the team that are going to finish third in Ligue 2 and stay up. But I'm not as optimistic as you on their chance of staying up. Sorry,
Rich.
I'm going to be ever so slightly more optimistic and go 17th, because I think I could make a case that there will be 3 teams that could finish below them.
Interesting stuff, Peter.
I really do want them to stay up, but no, like Julien was saying, sobering reality is that their best hope probably is the playoff, because defensively they are so weak. They have added some goals, but yeah, they want to take confidence and maybe they'll push on. But they are one of the teams that haven't captured the eye in the way that, say, Troyes have. Or so yeah. No, I don't think they will.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think it's going to be a really tight battle at the bottom. I think Metz will get relegated, but above them there are 4 or 5 teams who could arguably finish in that 19th and 18th spot. So I'd hope that Strasbourg aren't one of them, but their lack of goals is a real worry. I know De Costa got 2 yesterday, but they do really struggle in forward areas. So moving on to the final game of yesterday, and our final talking point for today's pod is the Lyon-Troyes game, a very comfortable 5-0 win for Lyon in the end. Memphis Depay, who's sort of been in and out recently, his form has been, he's been involved with a number of goals, but his form has been quiet, probably, to say the best. So, Rich, I want to get your opinion on Depay. Is this a sign that, you know, he's returning to sort of capturing that potential or establishing that potential that perhaps he once showed, or is this just a bit of a flash in the pan?
I fear it's probably going to be more of the latter. I do think with Depay, there's an element that he's a bit of a luxury player. Because when he wants to play, yeah, you know what, he can be really, really good, as we saw against Troyes. But there is too many times where he just doesn't seem to want to play. And when he's in that kind of mood, he's a bit of a nightmare, to be perfectly honest, because, you know, he'll try too much, he'll sulk, he'll pout, he'll be like a petulant kid. It was a great performance. Singularly, it was a great performance. It was a brilliant hat trick. Even the penalty, call as you like, Panenka. I always think with some players that take Panenkas, it gives you an insight into the kind of attitude that they have. There are one or two exceptions to that rule, but it was very much a Depay kind of finish to that penalty. But for me, we now need to see this consistently. He's too much a case of interspersed with 2, 3, 4, where he's a bit anonymous, a bit of a liability at times, and incredibly frustrating. So I think if we are to talk about him really turning that corner, regaining that form that we saw with the sort of raw potential when he was in Holland, then we need to see this now. More consistently. At 23 years old, that has to be his target, and that has to be what Lyon want to need out of him.
Yeah, it would be great to see him back to the best that he showed at PSV and perhaps at the World Cup for Holland. But it does feel like that's still a long way away. But it's promising signs. He could be great for Lyon as part of that front four. And Julien, I'd really like to get some thoughts on your thoughts on that front four and how you think they're gelling. It was quite a big turnover of players in the summer. Tolisso and Lacazette obviously leaving. Do you think that the current crop of forwards is good enough to sort of drag them towards the Champions League place? Are they gelling correctly? Is this the right mix of players? So I think we talked about Depay being a little bit, not having perhaps the best attitude, but you may even see it from Mariano Diaz a little bit as well. Are they going in the right direction with this front four?
I think it's interesting. It's really fascinating. I think Fekir has reached a level that he never reached before, which is remarkable considering the injury he had and the context when he came back and the departure of Tolisso and Lacazette and Gonalon and all the others. So I think well done to him. For the rest, I'm not convinced by Mariano Diaz, I have to say. I think he's scoring goals. I give him that. He was good against Monaco. I give him that as well, although in his own very special way. I'm not convinced so much either about Bertrand Traoré, who I think has a lot of potential, but he's still playing like a street player who he does his own thing on his own and rarely puts his head up, and it's a nice goal against Everton, and there's a few good tricks and there's a few good skills, but I'm not really sure collectively it brings that much to the team. And for Depay, the thing that will save Depay, in my opinion, is that Houssem Aouar, who is a fantastic talent, is better for me in midfield than on that left-hand side where you restrict him to being, 20 meters between the touchline and the inside of the pitch, where he basically has to wait for Ferland Mendy or Marçal to take the overlap, and where Aouar is going to be amazing in midfield, where he's got the game ahead of him, in front of him, and he's so perfect technically in everything he does that's where he has to play. He has to play more centrally for me. And that will save Depay, because that means that Aouar then is not going to be on the left-hand side, and that's where Depay can play. That's my theory. Genesio might have another one, I don't know, but that's what I think could save Depay. So to answer the question, I'm not really sure exactly what the question was, my friend, but I think they've got a lot going forwards. If Genesio finds the right way, and if they're all up for it, and if they all learn to play with each other, and Mariano becomes a bit more collective and, can do more work with his back to goal, in his link-up play, in the runs he makes. If Traore can play a bit more with the rest of the team, if Fekir keeps this level, if Depay is a bit less selfish. I know that's a lot of if, but I think they have something there for sure, because I think even Maolida looks great. Jebols for sure when he played looked great as well. So they have a lot there. It's defensively the problem mostly, but offensively, if they find the right way to play all with each other, I think they have something special going on.
That's a really interesting point you make about Aouar. If he was playing midfield, that would save Depay. Does that perhaps upset the balance in that midfield? If they did move to say a 2 with him and perhaps Toussaint in there, and perhaps you need to play Fekir and you play a front 3, does that leave Toussaint a little bit isolated perhaps? Because Aouar is quite an attacking player.
But then you need a Ndombele. I don't think you can bench Ndombele either, which means that then, and that's the problem, you have to play Fekir wide, but Fekir can't play wide. So if you play the 3 in midfield with Toussaint and Ndombele and Aouar, which for me is arguably the best midfield they have, and is the one they had yesterday at Troyes, which is perfect because he gives them more balance, because I think he gives them the creativity of Aouar, the power and the powerful runs of Ndombele, and the intelligence of Toussaint, who is just sweeping everything behind those two. That's perfect. But then the issue is, where do you play Fekir? So whether he plays in that formation and for one game maybe Fekir can play wide and then comes in, more centrally regularly in that game, let's say against the Monaco, against the PSG, against the Marseille, I don't know, away from home especially, maybe. Or you play 4-2-3-1 with Fekir in that number 10 position, where he's been sensational this season. It's Genesio to find a way, but I still think that midfield 3 would bring them the balance that they need in the big games to get results. Indeed,
it's definitely an interesting sort of jigsaw puzzle Genesio's got in front of him. So we'll finish with a quick word on Troyes, Peter. Do you think this is them reverting to their form of 2 seasons ago, or are they more competitive than that?
It felt a bit like that in the second half. But, I've been really impressed with what I've seen of Troyes this season. They've gone after teams, they've scored goals, they've done a lot better than Amiens or Strasbourg. So I don't think it'll be one result will throw them back 2 years to hell. But I think longer term they're going to be okay. They have enough about them. I've been very impressed with Samassa in goal. I think he's a real asset for them. I think they'll be fine. I think this is more of a blip than something more severe that warrants intense observation.
Fantastic. Okay, I'd love to see them step up. I felt so sorry for them when they came up and were so off the pace and so terrible. But they've been a little bit more competitive here, so hopefully they can avoid such a nightmare that they had before. So our very final segment on the show this week, I know is one of the nation's favourites, is our Ligue 1 snapshot. So the chaps have picked a sort of a little more niche point from French football, or Ligue 1, that they're sort of just going to do a couple of words on that interest them. So I'd love to start with you, Rich. What's your Ligue 1 snapshot for this week?
Mine's very, very brief, but it's a little shout out to a young central defender by the name of Vitorino Hilton, who has been exceptional for Montpellier recently, has been part of a Montpellier side who themselves have been very, very good. He's 40 years old. That's the main thing, really. He's 40 years old. Arguably in those sort of dozen games that he's played in, he has been one of, if not the standout central defender in Ligue 1. In those kind of performances at that age, sadly I'm quickly approaching that age myself, so I can't say too much, but it's just crazy to see, that run. You pick out some games. They held PSG to a 0-0 draw. They held Monaco to a draw. They've beaten Saint-Etienne. They've beaten Nice. it's just a fantastic run, and it's no coincidence that solidity. I think they've only conceded 2 goals in that run of 6 games as well. It's no coincidence that Hilton's return to the squad has coincided with that kind of form.
Sure, it is fantastic to see that he's sort of got into his late 30s and maintained that level that he had sort of when he joined Montpellier and they won the league, and he was great. He's still an effective defender at 40 years old. Peter, your Ligue 1 snapshot for the week.
Mine is from the Football Observatory. They've released their player development statistics, and it shows a number of Ligue 1 clubs at the right end. So their development statistics are based on UEFA's guideline of what counts as homegrown. So they have to be at the club for 3 years between 15 and 21. So when looking at what players each club has developed that have made it into the top 5 leagues, Lyon are third behind Real Madrid and Barcelona, having produced 34 players, and 11 of which are still at the club. Ligue 1 is in the top 5. We are delighted to say. Rennes at 8th. They've produced 22 players in the top 5 leagues in Europe. Nantes are also 11th, which is a relative surprise. Monaco are joint 11th as well. PSG are 12th. Toulouse are 16th, and Bordeaux are 16th as well. So strong French representation at the top end of player development.
Interesting stuff. Julien, is there anything that's caught your eye over the sort of last few weeks of Ligue 1 that you'd like to highlight?
For this weekend, I will talk about Keita Balde, because I think the first goal he scored for Monaco on Saturday against Caen could be huge. I think the potential was always there. He is a fantastic talent, still very young and still so powerful. I heard a very famous pundit on French television, football pundit, who used to be very, very big and now he's a bit less big, saying that Keita Balde was just running straight forward. And I thought that was really, really harsh and completely, what's the word, showed a lack of knowledge about Keita Balde, who's I think, great player with his first touch. And we saw that against Lyon, for example, where he gave the through ball to Ronnie Lopez on the first Monaco goal over there, who can run really fast, straight forward. I give him that. But can also play wide, can also play as a second striker, can play with Falcao, can play on his own up front. I think he's a great talent. And I think it was very important for him to get a goal as quickly as possible, especially in the context of Monaco's last performances. And I think that's going to do him a lot of good and Monaco a lot of good. And I'm really looking forward to seeing more of him in that team.
Yeah, it's a really interesting signing. Hopefully he can fill some of the gaps left by some of the sales over the summer, because they need that sort of player in their team. So thank you very much, chaps. We'll finish off there. Just a quick message, given that this is our 100th episode, from Nathan, who's obviously hosted the majority of those episodes. Couldn't be with us tonight, but he did leave me a quick message just to say thank you to absolutely everybody who's tuned in and contributed to this wonderful podcast. Over 100 fantastic episodes. I still remember being asked to do it a few years ago, and it has filled me with great pride to bring you each and every week of the Ligue 1 season and international tournament the latest news and the latest action on Ligue 1. So some special thanks to Eric Devin and Philippe Bargil, who were instrumental in the early podcasts and regulars. And thank you very much to Rich Allen and Peter Rutzler as well, who've been fantastic in the last year. So here's to 100 more, he says. So thank you very much, Nathan. We thoroughly enjoyed listening as well. So chaps, enjoy your weekends. Thank you very much for joining us, Peter.
Thank you.
I should say enjoy your week. It's Monday.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the weekend.
Part of my job. It's covering all this football. It feels like it's the end of the week now. So thank you very much, Rich, as well.
Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Julien.
Pleasure, boys. Anytime. That was great fun.
It's goodbye from all four of us. Have a good week and enjoy the football.